Welcome to City Hall. This is the chambers of the Court of Common Council. I'm John Gale. This is the Legislative Affairs Committee meeting of the Hartford City Council, and with me this evening to my left is Majority Leader Councilman James Sanchez, and we have an agenda with 4 items on it, but we're going to take up a 5th item that's not on this agenda, and we'll get to that in a moment. In the meantime, we'll just dive right in to agenda item number 1, which is an ordinance that's been proposed that would create the honorary positions of a troubadour, a storyteller, a commentator, a flow artist, and an earth artist. And this ordinance, I believe, is coming on the heels of the fact that the city created a poet laureate approximately a year and a half ago. And I think our Cultural Affairs Commission felt that was so wildly successful that we ought to move on and do some other honorary appointments and enliven the arts and the arts community here in Hartford. And so, do we have our Cultural Affairs Commissioner chair to speak on behalf of this? Sure. And we actually have a new mic system, so you can get mic'd up and everything.
So, yeah, it certainly is coming on the heels, as you mentioned, of the poet laureate work that we worked through with City Council, and that Councilman Gale brought forward and shepherded through and helped do the fund development for, and really took it on personally, and sat through the entire appointment process with us, which was a great benefit to us, to have the eye of what's important to the city be sitting there at the table along with us. And so with that, when the idea was brought forward to look at a troubadour as well for the city, in keeping with what's happening at the state level and what's happening with other cities around the country, we thought that what we should really take a look at is how do we truly and deeply honor the vibrancy of the arts in our community, what's truly happening here in the role that it's playing in catalyzing this bubbling of energy that's happening throughout the city, in a way that it could be visible, that it could reach further and deeper, and in a way that it could lead to some of in an entryway, as a portal to some of the development work that's happening across the city. So this idea that we could take economic development efforts, that we could take educational improvements that we're looking at making throughout the city, and that we could connect it all together through arts and culture, seemed fitting, right? It also struck us as though it would be a pretty large undertaking, and we have a commission that's organized and is up for taking on that, is up for that undertaking, in that the learning from having done the poet laureate piece has taught us some best practices in how we can build quicker consensus, how we could build smarter committees, and how we could devise a more inclusive set of processes for creating these distinct positions throughout the city. And also on the heels of the poet laureate work, what we've recognized is a powerful appetite in the city for this kind of representation across the neighborhoods. Frederick's just doing an incredible job. He's out, he's everywhere. The level of media attention that it's garnered has been incredibly positive and encouraging for the arts in the community. And his ability to work with kids and to take an inspiring and educational leadership, as opposed to purely just talking about his work and presenting his work. His ability to elicit a kind of understanding and passion in his space, to us is it's empowering. It's at the heart of a city, and so let's do more, and we're organized for it. So I'm just really curious, from having read the ordinance, if you haven't. Oh, one other thing I should mention. While we really appreciated the funding source for when we did for the poet laureate work that we'd done, and that Councilman Gale was able to connect us with folks who had an interest in the space, we're taking a look at a slightly different model moving forward. We're taking a look at engaging the community itself in supporting these roles. So doing fundraising efforts throughout the community to raise the funds, to take a look at corporate and foundation matching support versus corporate or organizational and foundations funding the whole thing. To actually start taking a look at encouraging engagement through the community by actually having a stake in the game, however small that stake may be, seems another way of giving folks the opportunity to actually deeply own the role that arts and culture plays in community. So that's one piece that I wanted to add before checking in with you on what you were seeing in there, what the deliberation has been thus far on this work, and to get a sense of where we are, because we're ready to roll.
Why don't you take a minute for the uninitiative, which includes me, and describe what each of because there's 5. We now have one honorary position, which is a poet laureate. Most people have at least some passing familiarity with a poet laureate. They might have heard of Maya Angelou being poet laureate of the U.S. at one point in time. And you just mentioned Frederick Douglass Knowles II, who was our poet laureate and who actually came to City Council September 9th, I believe, and he opened up council for us that night. It was really nice, and I've been to several of his events, and to your point, they are engaging, and he is everywhere. But you're proposing to expand from poet laureate into areas that I think people may not be familiar with.
Sure.
So if you'd go through and just give us a quick little summary of what each of these would be.
I'll do a quick one, and always open for more questions to dig in deeper, because it gets really in the weeds with some of the distinctions between these. First off, I think the next easiest one to understand is the troubadour. So this is essentially a music-based artist. It could be an individual artist or a group of artists that creates music, and will be creating some specific pieces for the city as well over the 3-year term. So that one's pretty straightforward. The next on the list, can you read them off to me, John?
Because, sure. The next one on the list is a storyteller.
Yeah. So storyteller quite different from a poet, right? So we're imagining this as any number of means of storytelling. It could be a filmmaker, it could be a writer, it could be a playwright. It's someone that's telling stories, largely fiction, about happenings that also ground some of their work in the happenings of the city itself. So it's a writer, but not a poet per se. Our poet laureate had the opportunity to step into some other more performative art forms. This person is, it's a novelist or a short story writer or a playwright or a filmmaker that tells stories, from that lens and that perspective. And again, like everyone else on this list, will be contributing over these number of years a piece of work that speaks to the city.
commentator.
So now, by contrast, a commentator is delivering a piece of, whether it's satire. It's in a lot of ways in the Mark Twain tradition, right? It's delivering some satire or a piece of documentary work versus fiction work that's potentially collecting oral histories from the community and mirroring it back to us as a way of reflecting where we stand right here, right now as a community. It is inevitable that someone working in that space is going to be producing material that's based on the city because, by and large, the folks who work in this space work with what they know best, usually where they are. So someone who's making social commentary, potentially political commentary, who's taking a look at the city and reflecting back on us where we are right now.
Yeah, we have a group of commentators that come to every council meeting.
I could imagine so, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from them all.
Flow artists.
So, flow artist is coming from the movement discipline of the arts. So dancers primarily are how we've seen flow artists, but of late there's been a rise in other types of movement-based disciplines, like flame artist, for example, would be a great example. Folks who are working with hula hoops and fire and in other ways of using body to either tell stories or to convey meaning in some way.
And the last.
So would that include mimes? Is that?
Absolutely, a mime would fit into that.
And the last one you have is an earth artist.
Yeah, so we broke out the specific piece of earth art as a rising trend across the country. These are folks who are dealing with environmental concerns and doing art around environmental concerns, and taking a look at things like eco-justice and even the racial inequity around eco-justice issues. And are in a process of doing work that is commenting on, in service to, and in support of the ground where we live. We're finding that that's a particularly germane conversation that gets left out very frequently in the discussion of art lately, and are so delighted to see an upsurge in energy across the country and across funding across the country for the arts around acknowledging some of the climate issues that we're facing, and on both the emotional level and on the cultural level, on how it's affecting how we come together as people. And clearly on the economic and the justice levels.
So the earth artist could be working in any medium?
Yeah, in pretty much any medium, yeah.
But the focus of the art would be?
Is content. Yeah, that's the one that's more specific about content than it is about form.
Got it. Mr. Majority Leader, any questions?
No questions. Thank you. The explanations, I'm looking forward to this. And I'm hoping that we can get this done quickly.
Right on.
So we can start it off.
Sounds good.
I'm not sure if you already started the process as far as the documents that's necessary or the amendment that's being created, but the sooner the better.
So we should have submitted at this point, along with with the various ordinances that we put in, applications for each, and organizing policy, so how we would actually run each program. They mirror the Poet Laureate in a lot of ways. We cleaned up some of the language so that it could be more inclusive. That was one of the big pieces of learning that we did with the Poet Laureate program. recognizing that that there were some requirements that we had that actually left out a big swath of our community. And so we reworked those so that other forms of qualification could be submitted, and therefore opened it up for a lot more folks to participate.
And I'm expecting that we're gonna have a list of nominees to be appointed.
Yes. So I suspect that it's going to work the same way that I know that our plan is for it to work the same way that it did for the Poet Laureate, where we're going to send out, we would love to do a press release on this. We would love to hold a number of meetings strategically placed throughout the city where we could inform folks about what we're doing, what we're looking for, and do workshops and preparing for submittal of applications. Then once we gather the simple process versus the fundraising process for now, once we gather all of the applications, then they'll go in front of committees. We'll have a committee for each, made up of a host of different folks, including some commissioners, some subject matter experts throughout the city, and I believe a representative from City Council and the mayor's office as well, and which is what we did last time, right? And from that, we'll vet through all the work as the commission, and we'll make a recommendation for each to you. We'll always have alternates if for some reason you take a look at the stuff and have, a really grounded reason for like, dude, no, not this way.
With the exception of the troubadour, right?
Yeah, if it's a combo.
Solo
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And that might be true of some of the others as well, right?
My name is Komola Matrevi, and you say it perfectly right. I'm originally from Togo, West Africa, and short story about myself, I came to this country in 2011, and I came through thanks to the diversity visa. Now there are all kinds of policy to remove it, but that's how I came to this country, and I'm thankful for Senator Kennedy, who proposed that bill a long time ago. When I came to the United States, I didn't start off in Connecticut. I went around the country a lot. I started off in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Oklahoma. I eventually joined the military and served in the United States Army. And while serving in the United States Army, I enrolled at Washington University in St. Louis, where I went to law school and graduated. And after my enlistment period, I came to Connecticut, where I was admitted to a human rights and social justice program because I'm just passionate about the issues facing our communities in general, whether it's immigration issues, crime issues, or the overall justice system. So I came to Connecticut, enrolled at UConn Law, and graduated in 2017. Upon graduating, I was fortunate enough to be recommended for an internship at the Attorney General's office, where I eventually completed the internship and went on to work for the former Attorney General for about a year. So I was recently admitted to the bar in Connecticut, and I've decided to make Hartford my home, because ever since I came, this city has welcomed me and given me all the opportunities I've ever searched for, and I made my friends. I consider everyone here family, even though my own family still haven't made it to the United States yet. So my interest in this particular commission goes very deep because, first of all, of my own origin. Second of all, is also my area of practice. When I was in law school, I actually volunteered in immigration work. I represented refugees and special immigrants, people who come from abroad, people fleeing armed conflict, who comes here to the United States and Connecticut and don't know how to navigate our complex legal system. And I enjoy representing these people, and being one of these people, I enjoy doing more than just representing their legal interests, actually reaching out to them for them to get involved in our community in Connecticut, because we have a beautiful community, and sometimes people just don't know how to get by and where to reach out to get what they really need. So I've noticed that this commission has been doing a great job in this sense, in essentially getting the city of Hartford and the state of Connecticut, the legislature, to pass the Trust Act So I'm thankful for it, and I want to contribute to this great mission, and that's why I am applying for this position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Councilman?
So it sounds like you're very dedicated to what you're hoping to accomplish being on this commission. And this goes for everyone that's going to be appointed, most likely, is that it does take not only the dedication but the time to put forth into this commission. It's a lot of personal time. I appreciate that everyone here has applied and are interested, and but most definitely, besides the dedication of what you hope to accomplish, but it's also the dedication of that personal time that's going to take away from you and your family. So thank you for that. And,
Thank you.
And I'm hoping that time is affordable to you and everyone else here in this chamber.
Absolutely, Mr. Councilman. I've made up my schedule to include this as an essential portion of my day, to include the work I do. I've been volunteering with the commission already, to include the work I've been doing for the immigrant community, the refugee community, as part of my daily routine. So time commitment will not be a problem for me. And I'm looking forward to working with all the members of this commission and future members.
Okay. And also I want everyone to know that our doors are open. If you have any kind of recommendation to change the policies or amending the ordinances or what have you, I'm sure Councilman Gale or myself or any other council members are there to help you out with these changes.
Really appreciate that, Councilman.
Yeah, and I just want to second that. And, again, these comments apply to everyone here who's going to be appointed to a commission. The commissions do a lot of incredible work. You actually just heard on the first item on the agenda one of our commissions and some of the work that the Commission on Cultural Affairs has done, and their work led to an ordinance being enacted. So please feel free to reach out to us. All the council members are on the city's website. You can find our emails there.
You could just walk right in.
Well, I was going to say
Absolutely.
that, but the darn door is locked these days, so it
Definitely.
might not be as easy to walk in, but we have a doorbell, I guess, and our business cards are there. But, we should be very, people that are easy to find. So you come and find us anytime. Councilman Sanchez, point, our door is always open, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Councilman. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Sure.
Good evening, Councilman. Good evening, everybody else. My name is Barbara Gongolo. I hope you guys are having a great rainy evening. So what would you like me to
Well, we
say?
have a lot of wonderful people coming before us this evening.
Yes.
So it is a very pleasant evening. And I don't think we got a lot of discord, which also makes life kind of nice.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay.
And then your interest in this particular commission, the Refugee and Immigrant Affairs.
Thank you, Councilman. My name is Barbara Ngongolo. I'm originally from Tanzania, and I originally came to America in 2002. My father was a senior foreign minister, and he was also a diplomat. So we came, and my dad was working in the United Nations, and he was very active with immigrant and refugee community. And so I grew up under that light of wanting to represent people that are oppressed and underrepresented. I've been working as a medical and legal interpreter for the past 5 years. I started off at Yale New Haven Hospital. As an interpreter, I got to know all the problems that are going on in the refugee community, and especially underrepresentation and alienation and discrimination. And as an interpreter, I couldn't really do anything about it because I had to remain transparent and just interpret everything I was saying. When I moved to Hartford, the problem seems to be very, very similar to New Haven. That forced me to design a program, and I wrote a project proposal to the Archdiocese of Catholic Charities, which is the resettlement agency in Hartford. And in my proposal, I explained to them the problems that are going on with the refugee community here in Hartford, such as living in apartments that are infected with bed bugs, having slumlord issues, not having access to social and economic opportunities, bullying in schools, discrimination at work. So I was able to get a job as a consultant, and just working with this community has been very eye-opening for me, and it just feels so good to know that now they feel welcomed in Hartford because of my work. And also the language barrier has been reduced because I speak their language. I speak Swahili, and I speak other tribal languages that the Congolese and the Tanzanian and Burundian refugees speak here in Hartford. So I've been working closely with that community and the school district, trying to involve the refugee parents with the school so they can be involved with their children's academic affairs, as well as reducing isolation by empowering the community through exposure. I've taken field trips to the United Nations. With my group, I have pretty much helped them feel represented, for their voice to be heard. I go to appointments with them, I speak to their landlords, so that's pretty much what I'm doing. And currently, I'm a youth mentoring program coordinator at Catholic Charities. And I'm very interested in being part of CREA because I love all the great work that they've been doing. And just giving me a voice to speak for those that are voiceless is very, very empowering to me.
Thank you very much. Councilman?
I appreciate your dedication and interest in this commission, and I wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second that. Thank you. We love all the passion. Okay, well, that takes care of item number 2 on the agenda. I think I'm going to pass item number 3 for the moment. And we're going to go to item number 4, which is communication from Mayor Bronin, confirming the appointment of Richard Zippick? Zippick, just Zippick, okay. Richard Zippick to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much, Councilman. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And let me just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm interested in serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals, or the ZBA, as it's commonly known. Professionally, I'm an architect. I've been an architect for many years. I started practicing architecture here in Hartford back in the 70s. This was long before computer-aided design. Everything was done manually, and it took a whole lot longer to get drawings completed. I joined a firm at that time called Hartford Design Group, and later became a partner in the firm. The firm is now known as TSKP Studio, with Taisoo Kim as one of my partners. There are a total of 4 partners in the firm. So I feel that over the many years that I've practiced architecture in the city and throughout the whole region, that I've learned a lot. And now also as a business owner and as a current resident in the city, I feel it's time for me to give a little back. I have a certain expertise. I've sat on the other side of presentations before planning and zoning commissions, and I've also served on the other side of the table as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission when I lived in Hamden a number of years ago. I served on that commission for 5 or 6 years, and so I'm very familiar with planning and zoning laws. I've been trained in that, and I think I can give something back to the city in terms of my own professional expertise. The ZBA is an interesting entity because as much as zoning regulations try to define different possibilities, there are exceptions. And so the Zoning Board of Appeals needs to use its judgment about making exceptions, allowing exceptions to occur. So I understand the whole purpose of zoning regulations, how they're established to protect property values and allow for a common good in terms of safe places to work and live. And with that in mind is how I would approach a zoning board of appeals. As long as no one gets hurt, if there is an exception that needs to be considered, then I think that should be considered. So that's what I bring to the table. I hope you agree that I would serve, that I would be an asset to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I look forward to serving the city.
Thank you.
I have two questions. What is your opinion on preservation of the architectural designs of the buildings that still survives, I should say, still survives Hartford, because we lost so many buildings in the 70s and 80s. And two, what's also your opinion on green infrastructure and technology to be incorporated into new development?
Those are very good questions. The city has a rich fabric of architecture in the city. A lot has been lost. When certain developments occurred, there was wholesale demolition of neighborhoods that have been lost, and excellent examples of buildings that evoked the spirit of that time. I think it's my opinion that we need to preserve, if it's possible to preserve, those edifices that are part of the fabric. I think people learn from that. I also think that it lends an air to the city that you just cannot recreate. I know, because I've worked on renovations of historic buildings and preservations of historic buildings, including the train station here in Hartford, as well as some other projects in the city, that if you lose them, you'll never get them back. And some of them are just priceless. You cannot recreate the craftsmanship that was part of the construction of those buildings. So I'm very much in favor of doing whatever it takes to preserve those buildings. Now, some developers will say that it's time to move on, demolish those buildings, but I'm of the opinion that developers should try to incorporate, and if it's possible to preserve and protect, that they should endeavor to do that. Your other question concerning green infrastructure. There's a notion now in architecture and in building sciences that it's achievable to build a net zero building, for example, that it is possible for a project to generate the energy that it needs for its inhabitants. The big challenge has always been, or it still is today, how do you generate electricity? And right now there's only one technique that's achievable in the city, and that's photovoltaics. So, and that requires a lot of panels on either the roof or the ground, and perhaps on the walls of a building. I think that that should be allowed, as long as no one is hurt by that process, whether it's through reflections or obscuring views or doing other kinds of damage to neighbors. But I think it's inevitable that that technology will become standard. It actually is inevitable. So there are more and more efficient ways of creating photovoltaic panels to allow for electricity to be generated. And I think that's the future. It absolutely is the future. So I'm a big supporter of green infrastructure. There are other techniques, whether it's geothermal, for example. Insulation is critical to conserving energies. So I'm a big proponent of green infrastructure. Absolutely.
Have you ever been involved with rain gardens on new structures or bioswales, for water conservancy?
Yes, and I'm a big believer in that as well. That's not, that doesn't generate energy. However, it is important in preserving the groundwater. And the groundwater is critical because it all eventually becomes, not all of it, but a lot of it becomes drinking water. And unless you protect the groundwater and recharge storm waters back into the ground to make sure that the groundwater is present, rather than collecting rainwater and then piping it away, get it back into the ground. I'm a big believer in that. And yes, projects that we've done absolutely have included rain gardens that are designed specifically to get rainwater back into the earth. So there are ways to do that. We've also done green roofs so that they do a couple of things. One, they do collect rainwater and then are used to irrigate foliage or growing plants on the rooftops. And also, so in addition to conserving that rainwater, it also helps in terms of insulation and reducing a heat sink, creating this island effect, the heat island effect that's often a problem in some developments. So I'm a big proponent of that. I'm very familiar with it.
Just to give you a heads up, I did put in a new ordinance, and it's all about green technology and infrastructure, and I hope you get an opportunity to see that.
I will.
Hopefully it'll be coming up to council soon.
Great.
Thank you.
So we just went to the groundbreaking for the new Park Street Library.
Yes.
Did I see you there?
I was not there.
Okay.
My partners, Tai-Soo Kim and Whit Eigelhart, were in charge of that project, and that project actually does try to conserve and preserve some features in the original building there, and does include things like timber, for example, which is a renewable resource. But I was not at that groundbreaking, no.
What's his name?
Tai-Soo Kim, that's his partner.
He was there.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, I have no other questions. Thank you very much for your willingness to participate in the zoning board. Anything further?
No.
Thank
Okay.
you, gentlemen.
And as I said with the others, your appointment will likely go forward on October 28th.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, item number 5 on an agenda that only has 4 items is the appointment of 3 individuals to the Veterans Affairs Commission. And so I'm taking the 3 of you tonight off agenda on the hope and the prayer, but I think probably reasonably made, that we will pass you 3 forward to council this coming Tuesday, the 15th. And get the veterans in place, because I know we have a special veterans holiday coming up. So we're looking to do that. So if you 3 appointees, if you want to figure out who's going to go first, we'll start with you.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Mr. Grant for his work, and as well as his invested trust in me of being a part of this Veterans Affair. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. First and foremost, I'm a 25 years resident of Hartford.
And your name first.
Lantibin Williams, I'm sorry, sir. Lantibin Williams. I'm a veteran of 20 years of loyal, dedicated service, not only but to the United States, but to the American citizens as well. I went to 4 tours overseas, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And I should say, well, I wouldn't want to say cheated death. I had many comrades, including couple here that also served in the military. It was a heck of an experience. I take that particular experience and hopefully bring it to this particular committee of Veterans Affairs. First and foremost, I have some proposals that I'd like to work with my members of how we go enact a program for veteran, homeless vets out here that you probably have seen many times. It hurts me dearly to see them out there begging for money and nowhere to sleep. I'm sure the city of Hartford government have some other type of programs that we could somehow retrieve, or the Veteran Affairs Committee will create some type of program where we can help those particular individuals, male or female, it doesn't matter, as long as they serve in the United States military. This is the greatest country in the world. I cannot believe that our veterans out here are homeless. It hurts me dearly. And I'm looking forward to my members, if I get appointed, as well as change or create new ordinance that the city of Hartford can help these individuals. I am passionate of being on this committee personally because of the fact it's not just the experience that I have, but also the leadership that I carry. I had my own squad. I had 13 subordinates under me, and sometimes even more. So I got 13 or more attitudes. I have to babysit sometimes, but then again, that's part of leadership. I don't think people understand what leadership really means. I don't even think people really understand what that American flag means. But anyways, I'm looking forward to this particular meeting. Looking forward to be appointed to this fair and get to work. I'm looking forward to it. I hope and pray that I could be an advocate for these veterans out here. If people were to ask me, would you ever do it all over again, I would say yes. Because I've seen people KIA. I mean, yes, it hurts, but I come home and I realize that what can I do now that I'm retired from the military as a veteran? I received a citation from our former mayor, Mr. Eddie Perez, for my participation in the war. And I hope that I can pen one of those or create a citation for some of these veterans out here that's been never heard of before. If we could search for them in a database anywhere, I would be more than happy to give them an award because they earned it. Hopefully that'll be a heck of an asset to this particular committee.
Thank you.
What branch?
The Army, sir.
Army. 20 years. Question, I'm not sure if you don't have to answer this or not. Are you registered with the VA or DAV?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I commend you.
Thank you
for serving. I really appreciate it, and I agree. A lot of our veterans aren't recognized at all, and what's sad is that we have quite a few who are homeless.
Too many, sir.
There are a lot of programs out there. I, for one, do know that, unfortunately, and I'm not sure about now, but back in my time, not that I'm that old, but for some odd reason, there's no re-entry to civilian world program, is the way I call it. And that's a big issue.
That was one of my proposals that I would suggest to my members of this particular committee, how to get reemployment for these veterans for the city of Hartford, not no other governmental branches. No, for the city of Hartford, I'm sure we should have a program for that.
Well, we should have a program, but we should also engage with the recruiting stations to find out what they're offering as far as the reentry from military to civilian world, because that's the difficulty. Everyone is trained in boot camp in a certain way with a certain structure, and ultimately to kill. And we're all angry, right? But when the contract is completed and we leave, there's no program that I heard of that will take you, let's say, for 3 months worth, and to at least educate you and bring you down from that level of mentality,
Right.
should I say, and also to help you out with what you've gone and suffered through in these wars, coming back with PTSD. So, I look forward to hearing, your input and what you've done in the commission. And again, thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
And let me just say that Councilman Sanchez is a little bashful and not making note that he's a former U.S. Marine.
There's no such thing as former.
He is a U.S. Marine, I'm sorry. I should know this by now.
Simplify.
My apologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Councilman Sanchez, Councilman Gill. My name is Xavier Lee Roman, a native of Hartford, born and raised here in Hartford. I graduated from Glastonbury High School, joined the United States Army at the age of 22, and went active duty. I was assigned to the 4th Infantry Division in Fort Carson, Colorado. I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, and I returned home to Hartford February 2015. Since then, I've completed some education at Capital Community College here in Hartford. While doing that, I worked part-time at South Park Inn, a homeless shelter here in Hartford. And since then, I've gained employment working with veterans on a greater capacity. I'm aware of many different organizations and supportive services for veterans. And I think that my knowledge would be an asset to the commission, the Veterans Commission. Let's see. Off the top of my head, going back to your conversation with one of our other nominees here, military, when I was getting out, they have a program called TAPS. And this is a transitional program for 1 week, and they try to prepare exiting soldiers for the civilian life. And some of these programs out of Carson, which they might not be available here in Hartford or Connecticut, or something like employment opportunity, on-the-job training with the railroad systems, getting your CDL license, transferring your military vehicle license over to a civilian CDL, which will gain an opportunity working as a commercial driver. There were scuba diving courses. So you go to school to learn to become a welder or a scuba diver welder, and upon completion of this paid on-the-job training, you would get placed in a career. I think that's something we can definitely do here in Connecticut, beyond the Hartford level. Do you gentlemen have any questions for me?
Yes, what was that task?
TAPS, T-A-P-S. TAPS is usually the program that most militaries will use. I think that's what they call it in Groton as well. So I know my organization has been considering getting into the TAPS program to be involved in this reentry program into the civilian life. That is one key factor that we need to keep on our plate as we drive forward with different proposals on how we can better serve the veterans in our community.
I agree. I appreciate that information, and I'm looking forward to you both and our third party to making that happen. And again, our doors are open, but I'd like to get updates on what's going on so
Yes.
that I can help out as well.
Another challenge that I see today with the weather getting colder and the increased wet weather over the next few days, veterans have already been coming out of the woodworks. Not only veterans, individuals who are not veterans, homeless, who are staying in the Connecticut River. There are only a handful or two of beds available throughout the state at emergency shelters. And Hartford usually does the cold shelter at Willie Ware Community Center. My recommendation is that we consider opening up Willie Ware Community Center much sooner, maybe even this weekend. Shelters are at capacity. There are folks on wait lists. Just one recommendation that we can maybe look into on a very soon note.
You may be given the opportunity as a commission to call in department heads from the city, ask to have representatives from the administration. And so, to your point about opening Willie Ware, I'm not sure if that's done in conjunction with the Health Department and Department of Families. Because it may be that, I'm not sure who has control over that center, but this is something that I would encourage all of you as commissioners to seek out information, and don't be bashful about saying, you know, we'd like somebody from administration to come to this meeting and tell us what's going on. And then if you don't get somebody from administration to come to your meetings, you come back and tell us. You know, we'll see what we can do to make sure that the administration's paying attention. And, you know, I should think that this administration is going to be incredibly cooperative with all of you. You're all being appointed by the administration after all. And certainly, I'm sure I speak for the mayor. I know I speak for myself and Councilman Sanchez. We all want you to be tremendously successful. So,
Thank you, gentlemen.
We're here to help. Thank you.
And just to add, that would be Liani Arroyo, who's the director for the health department for the city of Hartford. I believe she has the authority, or at least close to it, to have those shelters open early. Okay, so then before the end of this meeting, I'll get my my business cards as well as Councilman Gale's and hand them out. And then what I always ask, send an email, because that creates a paper trail, and it also helps us out in remembering in which order we receive this and how we can help, so we can respond quickly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. Councilman Gill.
Thank you. Okay, last and certainly not least.
Good evening, Councilman. My name is Joe Espinal. So my background is that I'm a veteran of 5 active duty years in the United States Army. I commissioned in 2013. For those 5 years, I served the majority in Texas with the 1st Armored Division as a field artillery officer. I deployed in 2016 in support of Operation Inherent Resolve, that's the fight against ISIS. Returned towards the end of that year, finished out my 5 years, and transitioned here to Hartford to attend school at UConn Law, where I attend full-time. I continue to serve in the United States Army Reserve as a company commander. I hold the rank of captain, and I manage 142 soldiers, mostly mechanics. Having transitioned into holding service member status and veteran status, I'm very familiar with the Department of Veterans Affairs programs, veteran benefits, veteran issues. I get all of my health care from either Newington or West Haven. The VA is there. So I'm intimately familiar with the local VA infrastructure. Beyond that, some of the very important issues are, yes, homelessness is a big one, and I've even got a very short story about it.